Alright guys, how you doing? Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about another subject for audiobook production, and today we're talking about gates and why you bloody well shouldn't be using them. There is something you can use that's similar, but we'll go into that. So to start off with, what is a gate or an audio gate? So the simplest way of thinking about an audio gate is someone's listening to your track, and when the signal level drops to a certain point, they just turn it off, they mute it. That's essentially what a gate is doing. Technically speaking, a gate is a downward expander because it alters the dynamic range of your track. Specifically, it's a downward expander with a ratio set to infinite. So ratio, as you know, is how much shit a thing does. Threshold is at what point it starts doing it. So a downward expander expands the dynamic range of your audio. Exactly like a compressor, but back to front. So it makes the loud bits louder or the quieter bits quieter, therefore making the gap between your audio or your dynamic range larger. It's expanding the dynamic range. And the way it's doing that in the context of a downward expander is it's focusing on the bottom. So the quieter part of your audio and the really quiet part of your audio, it's expanding this gap by reducing the volume of the quieter bit. So gates are used in audio production to cut out room tone, background noise, mic bleed. Mic bleed's where you have more than one person in, say, like a radio or a studio setting speaking, and you only want to hear the audio from that speaker's mic. Gates really only have a place in live audio. I can't think of a legitimate reason to use a gate while recording. One of the downsides to using a gate is you don't capture any of the room tone or ambient noise, which means not only do you not have that for editing purposes, but it also means whoever has to mix and master this track doesn't have a room tone sample to use for noise reduction to smooth out the audio on the track. So one of the other reasons people use gates or try to use gates incorrectly is to try and control mouth noise and breaths. Now this is typically a really bad idea, and most people learn this really quickly, because what happens is the gate just starts attacking the breath and you get that choppy sound. It's not very good, it's really distracting for listeners. Using gates in general for spoken word audio, where you want it nice and smooth, is a bad idea because cutting in and out the room tone sounds to the end listener like someone flicking on and off their headphones. It's really distracting. It sort of really pumps the audio. Let me give you an example of what that sounds like. So, up until now you've just been hearing raw audio. I haven't processed it at all. It's just as it comes out this mic. So to demonstrate the effect that a gate has, I'm going to increase my room tone with this fan. Right, now as I talk, you should be able to hear the fan going chugga 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 next to me. It's really bloody annoying, but bear with me. When I'm speaking, you can hear me over the fan because my voice is louder than the fan. Now we can cut out the fan noise in between when I'm speaking by applying a noise gate, but that won't remove the fan noise from the bits of the track where I'm speaking. It will still be there. So if I apply a noise gate here, when I talk, it sounds like the mic's just being flicked on and off. It's really distracting. And that's why, or one of the reasons why, you don't use a noise gate. So one thing you can do, if you're not using a gate like you shouldn't be, is to use a downward expander. Now a downward expander you will find in your tools, in your dynamic tools, in your DAW. And the trick to this, to make it work, is to make it as smooth as possible. We don't want it to be pumping in and out the audio. So a good place to start, if your audio is normalized to where it should be and compressed already, would be to start with a threshold of about -35. Once you've done your compression and normalization, I normally find -35 is a really good place to start with a threshold for a downward expander. The next point, and this is key, is the ratio, which is how much it's turning the audio down in the quiet bits. And this is really, really crucial that you keep it as low as possible. At maximum, absolute maximum, you can run 2:1. You're probably going to find something between 1.5:1 or 1.8:1 gives you a much more smoother, natural effect. The idea here is we don't actually want to be able to hear what it's doing. We want it to be really, really subtle. So you can check out my video on RMS for audiobooks, which explains how compressors work in the context of spoken word at least. But the threshold is at what point it starts doing stuff. But it's a downward expander, it's doing the quiet stuff. So if we set the threshold to -35, what we're telling it is go down to 35 and then everything under 35 turn down by the ratio. And so if we set the ratio to 2:1, for every one that it's under the threshold, it's turning it down by 2. It's sort of halving it. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's an easy way to think about it. And then if you set the ratio to 1.5, for every one down, it's cutting it down by a factor of 1.5. This should give you a nice, gentle effect. It will tone down the room tone, which should be mostly removed with noise reduction and just having a good recording setup. And it's also going to help reduce mouth noise and breaths. Excessive mouth noise it won't, excessive breaths it won't. If you have slash breaths like in between your sentences, you need to relax those in your performance. But if you have just gentle breaths like this, it will just help bring them down. Typically, you don't want to remove breaths completely from spoken word audio for things like audiobooks because it's very relating to the listener. It's very natural. It makes the listening experience very human. But it just brings them down a little bit and makes them a little bit less distracting. So, as an example of what I mean, I'm going to bring back my noise floor generator. And I will, when I edit this video, I will add a gate here. And when I've added the gate, I will put the settings that I used on the screen. And then once I've done that, I will change it over and I will put an expander on. With this much noise, an expander is still going to sound horrible, but I'll put the settings on the screen for what I used right now. And you should be able to hear that it's just mellowing it out a little bit, making it a little bit softer, which is what we like. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. That's it for this video. If you want to see more videos, subscribe to the channel. If you found this helpful, feel free to drop me a like. I'd be very appreciative. And until the next one, peace out.